Okay, good afternoon. My name is Rebecca DeMong, and I will be your session chair for this session today. The Southern Alberta Institute of Technology is excited to welcome Suzanne Robert and Giselle de Paiva to the inaugural International Project Management Day Symposium. Suzanne inspires a design-first work ethic in a technology-first world. Across 25 years of constant emerging technologies, Suzanne has worked with clients in every sector to envision and transform digital and service solutions to meet and exceed ever-changing employee, citizen, and customer expectations while remaining focused on business outcomes, technical feasibility, and responsible impact. Her role at Deloitte has brought her into the business of cyber, where she ensures digital solutions are responsibly designed to serve human needs. Currently focused on the emerging market of trusted digital identity, Suzanne leads multi-interdisciplinary teams, bringing the full capability of Deloitte to activating the digital identity ecosystem in Canada, accelerating its adoption and impact to Canadians, governments, and businesses. Giselle leads advisory and technical delivery of digital identity initiatives that impact our federal, provincial, and territorial governments in Canada. Popular credentials in the sector include COVID-19 verifiable credentials of varying frameworks to emerging requests of digital health cards and driver's licenses. Hailing from a long and accomplished digital transformation career in the financial services industry, Giselle looks forward to bringing together public and private partnerships in unlocking digital trust and identity in the Canadian economy. Given the emerging market, Giselle is also connected to Deloitte's global digital identity SMEs to bring a true one Deloitte experience to our clients in Canada. So now, without further delay, please welcome in joining with Suzanne and Giselle. I ask that you please mute your microphones and that you type your questions in the chat, and the session moderator will help ask those questions at the end of the session.
Right on. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's see if my slides will advance. Here we go. So Rebecca did such a great job introducing us. I don't feel like I have more to add about myself. I'm really excited to be here with Giselle. Giselle and I have been working together only, I think, 6 months now. And this is our first chance to speak at a symposium like this together. So I'm excited to be here, and just wanted to give a shout out to Giselle. It's her birthday today, and she's here on Eastern Standard Time talking to us at the end of her day. So really great to be here and excited to share some thoughts with you guys today. Giselle, anything you want to add to what Rebecca introduced you?
Yeah, just thanks, Rebecca, and I'm really excited to be here and meet with our audience today. One thing about my background is I am a professionally trained engineer, and this space kind of tickles those roots a little bit. So I'm excited to be speaking with the SAID team today on the topic of digital identity.
Cool. All right, so let's kick it off. So what we're going to do is explore how, trust enabling digital identity. Now, it's an emerging space. We're hearing it called citizen digital identity. We're hearing it called self-sovereign, decentralized. All of these are true. We're choosing to call it trusted digital identity in our presentation today, and we'll explore more about different types of activity in the identity space. But really, we want to look at, specifically at trusted digital identity and how it's emerging as the next big paradigm shift in this increasingly digital first world. So the first section we're going to unpack here is what I call the ignition. So really, why now is what we're trying to answer here. And I think, coming through the pandemic, I think we all probably recognize that digital adoption has really accelerated quite a bit. And it's also brought into focus the sort of really deeply human needs that we all have. So just a few slides up front here. I've cited at the bottom where these facts are from. but really some compelling evidence here about the acceleration. So just looking at bandwidth alone for internet traffic, you can see that there was drastic increases from at-home activity, blowing away previous numbers. So just if you look at USA and Canada, 49% growth in internet traffic. And then that middle piece is very much tied to what we're going to talk about with digital identity. It's this, getting away from PIN and swipe credit cards and moving into that contactless payment. The pandemic really accelerated that. And as people become more and more comfortable with digital wallets, it's going to make a big shift there in purchasing via unattended channels as one thing. But just that familiarity of the wallet is something to keep in mind as we move forward. And then migration from major urban areas, right? So this is just evidence that we're doing remote work and we're working with distributed teams. I just thought this was a fascinating chart about how many people have moved out of Manhattan. And I think here in Canada, I like to joke that we're seeing people pinging off the US border. It's opening up now, but I felt like I was seeing all the human beings kind of ping to each coast, right? Where it was like, I need to get away, I need to get a vacation, I'm going to the coast. And I've heard of a lot of friends and acquaintances that have moved as a result of the pandemic, or are even just living out of their vacation properties. So lots of movement, which is an indicator of, remote work, which is part of that digital world. And then McKinsey, always great for some evidence. I pulled a couple of slides up from some evidence there. If you look at 2017, 2018, acceleration of digitization for customer interactions, 20%, and then 36%, and then boom, into the pandemic, we got 58, and all the way over on North America, it's even more significant, 65. And then if you don't believe me yet, I'll give you one more slide, really just unpack a couple of things on here. Changing customer needs and expectations. 63% of orgs are seeing this and 62% believe that's going to stick. So that's not necessarily tied to digital, but I think the other numbers are pointing to that as well. Demand for online services, 62% of orgs are experiencing that change. I question that a little bit personally because I'm wondering if that accounts for the gig economy. I'm an Instacart user. I don't know if we have other Instacart users on the line, but the purchases actually at the grocer are being made by a person in person. But I, as the shopper or the consumer of those goods, I've used the digital channel to purchase those. So, just things to think about in terms of how prevalent digital is.
And Suzanne, like an interesting because the world I was playing in before the pandemic around just transformations as a whole and advisory of it, our clients, some of them had a 5-year, some were even a 10-year roadmap where they were tinkering with some things, but like on year 5 was when it was going to be this big lift and shift to move to an online channel. And the pandemic hit, and a lot of them knocked on our door to do it in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like that happened across the firm for all our skill sets. Mm-hmm. So and now so there's a bit of like, did we do it smartly when we did that at that speed?
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of business continuity was reliant on making that shift to digital. So that's a great proof point. I guess the one other thing to unpack on here just quickly is increased spending on data security. It says, 37% of organizations are seeing this. Only 53% believe it's going to stick. Maybe we'll have an argument, across this next, the next slides we're going to go through, but whether that might be on the low side. We'll see, time will tell. So let's take a look now at, I'm a researcher. I tend to go into very, very deep rabbit holes, and I came across this recently, and I come from a background of instructional design is kind of where I began my consulting career. And so Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs has always been top of mind in the way that I approach designing for human beings and ensuring that, we're making technology the servant and paying attention to the human beings. What this Gartner blog really unpacks is they're seeing evidence that human me, prioritizes my needs very differently than digital me does. So on the left-hand side there, we're saying, physiological stuff is very important. I have shelter, I have food, I'm safe. Belonging comes next. Suddenly, when you flip over to the digital side, belonging is second, safety is third, right? So the dissonance is there, and it's flipped. Like, for whatever reason, we get online and our digital selves go, oh, I need to belong, safety, yeah, whatever. So I found this really fascinating, especially as I've entered the world of digital identity and privacy preserving credentials. So I'm testing out this new slide on you guys. It's a little bit busy, but let me unpack it just a little bit. So I try to do here on the top is, if we just look at those 3 layers of the hierarchy, I'm sheltered and fed, check. Fed's only going to last a little while. So maybe I'm having to go digital to make sure that I'm fed, but we can say that I'm looked after. Safety, okay, I've taken these measures to be safe. That's sort of become my priority. I stopped leaving my home. I stopped connecting in person. I stopped team sports and hobbies. Guess what? At the top of that piece there, the third most important thing for me is now suffering. I'm really suffering from that connection. So what happens is I'm shifting over, and now I'm really doing a lot more in a digital way, right? So digital me needs a computer, needs a smartphone, needs a connection to the internet. And now, using that foundation, I can start to check mark my digital belonging. I'm connected on my social network. I can instant message people. I'm emailing. But guess what? Now, at the same level as belonging on the human me side, on the digital me side, now I'm maybe not paying enough attention to digital safety. And so what's happening is, this is the theory of Suzanne. We've got more digital exchanges happening. Now we've got less control of privacy. And I've just kind of smattered a few things on the digital side there, like that a lot of people are doing, shopping for food online. We heard stories of people not going to the doctor, but now we're seeing adoption of telemedicine. Sharing more, expressing more online to strangers, and really working and learning digitally. I know that folks at SAIT had an era of being at home and learning digitally. So, Giselle, any reflections on this before I move through it?
And so this is why I love when we do this together. I jumped into digital identity without realizing why. And I think this really, when you put it this way, it really helps me go, I didn't realize I care about this less in the digital world. Like, this is really interesting to go back into that research world, like you said.
Yeah.
Break it down into the human me and digital me being different. And I think it's super important on how we do responsible digital identity design, because those of us who are now super comfortable in digital world might have those biases as we design digital identity solutions, when really we should deconstruct it and go back to what's actually normal first.
Yeah. So please, if you've got any reflections, we're going to actually help you hook up to us on LinkedIn if you want to at the end of our presentation. But anybody want to share some feedback on how we're telling this story, I'd love to hear it. So just to summarize that initial sort of ignition section, we can say that the pandemic catapulted us into digital dependency, exponentially increasing our digital safety fatigue. It is a fatigue, right? Like, there's some stats about how many passwords we're expected to actually have and remember. And so a lot of that digital safety shift, I think, is quite a bit about fatigue. And then, further exposing vulnerabilities to our privacy. So let's talk about the movement that could happen to help us all take back control. I'm going to hand it over to Giselle here to move us through this. And I'm running the slides, so just let me know when you need me to hit forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, so what does taking back control look like? In the next little bit, we'll explore the methods for providing and verifying identity, and how that's going to evolve and really challenge the way the digital systems that are constructed today exist, and how we need to evolve it to what's going to come around the world for digital identity. So let's move to the next slide. Before we jump into this, and borrowing a little bit of Suzanne's design mindset here, how does it work today in real life? My name's Giselle. My friends and family know me as G. And so I just threw a curveball there. It's not the whole name, but my world still copes. The people who know me still know me. If for all of the new faces here today, and if I say I'm G, you accept that that's who I am, and we move on. And a lot of what I do in my life today, go by a coffee shop, I don't really have to identify myself. And if I change my address, I can still do a lot of my services, but not flip that to what Suzanne was saying in the digital world. If you change your name, a lot of things might break. Mm-hmm. You have to go and get your name redone on your identification documents before you have access to the same services. You change your address, that might mean you can't vote because you've got your card going. So like lots of things get interrupted, but that's not how it works really when you introduce yourself in the human world. So that was an interesting concept, again, to just deconstruct a little bit on how should we go back to identity? What did identity really mean to us? And on the side here are some interesting pictures on how the concepts of ID have evolved over time. And it's a really great graphic, and there's probably a link, or maybe we'll send it after, to study it, but it has evolved in a very interesting way. And if you look at where one started to where we are now, we really need to stop and think about what just happened there. Mm-hmm. Let's move on from here. So needless to say, proving who we are has gotten exponentially weirder, mm-hmm. and we need to look into why. Let's move ahead. So I briefly touched on paper and plastic and how we've completely embraced that. That's how we use ID today. But what are some of its limiting factors, if you will? And the easy one we can all think of is we've got bad actors out there. There's forgery on paper and plastic documents, and there seems to be more and more tech coming out to make those stronger. Passports went into having the machine readable zone, to then having the e-chip, to special ink on currencies, and so we keep layering on, trying to make these stronger, but the fraud still exists, and that's going to continue to proliferate. The other issue we're going to face as we get a little more organized in how we access services is just we start to have too many of these. We've got a driver's license card, a health card, a passport, a birth certificate, a citizenship card, and a degree and a diploma. And as life continues, we collect more and more and more of these things. And there's a funny cartoon, I should have probably put it on here, somebody heading to the airport, and it's just got now with the pandemic, like a stack of paperwork to take with them just to be able to board.
It's a good one.
So that's one that, maybe should really challenge our paper plastic reliance. And with the pandemic also, and with more digital interfaces, we want to more seamlessly integrate there. And well, your physical and paper cards don't allow you to do that without building a lot of error handling and control into those digital systems. And in the pandemic too, is we're not as comfortable having as many touch experiences. Suzanne touched upon it briefly with payments. The same applies to ID. You don't really want to be exchanging these as you move through your day. And the notion, and this one, I have to admit, I'm like, I fall prey to this too, is just the lack of privacy on your current physical and plastic. When you have to prove age, for example, to get access to buy a bottle of wine for a friend's dinner party, we're all used to just handing over our driver's license to prove age, but why am I sharing my address and the fact that I'm a donor, organ donor, and I have corrective lenses? Like, they don't need to know any of that. In fact, they don't even need to know my birth date. They just need to know I'm greater than 19. So, but we're okay with like completely just handing these things around. And so really we need to start looking at how much of privacy has not been built into our current paper and plastic methods. And lastly, and this is the concept of like, as humans, the things about us are going to change over time. Your last names, your credentials about your professional careers, your medical information. And so that just complicates keeping these things up to date. And so those are all a good reasons for us to not continue to band-aid the plastics and papers out there, but really dismantle it and make it seamless in the new digital world.
Yeah, maybe I'll add a little color. I was thinking I've got 3 stories that color this page, but I'll just use one of them. I recently had to renew my security clearance with the government of Canada, and if any of you have done that, there's reliability and then secret and then top secret. And to get your secret clearance to be able to work on government projects, wow, I had to go through, I think, a physical visit to an office with fingerprinting and a bunch of evidence and 10 years back of where I've lived, where my brothers have lived, where they've worked, all of these things. But the thing that was the most striking to me is I had to pull my birth certificate out of a lockbox, take a picture of it and email it. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, how many clouds is my birth certificate in now? And it's this tattered old, yes, I'm old, plastic card that's been sitting in a box untouched for many, many years. I haven't had to pull it out. And so just the world is changing. And it's just a very strange thing now to think about the security of my photographed birth certificate and where it is out there in the world now. Okay, so let's go to the next one.
Yeah, and this is another the comic strip on here was on the New Yorker back in 1993. And it was a joke then, and almost like foreshadowing what we're facing today, which is, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. So what's happening is we, to what Suzanne said earlier, we have a user account and a password for almost every digital interaction we need to have now. And we end up surrendering private information many times. And often, our brains, we just end up picking the same password many times, and we just keep ourselves vulnerable online. At the same time, the companies that are responsible for validating and securing this information are honeypots for bad actors out there, because they weren't just storing information about you, but they're storing now your credentials that essentially are likely access points to many other services too. So worrisome and growing incidents of identity fraud cases in the past years, and I think it's upwards of 45 billion a year that's lost in identity thefts around the world. So not a small problem ahead of us. Next slide. So where's digital identity coming into all of this, and why are we on this bandwagon? Before I explain decentralized identity, let's understand how identity still is sometimes or has begun to evolve. So the centralized model is what we're all probably used to: a username and a login for every access point that you have. And so it requires you to be pretty good at storing your passwords or have a system, and it's created companies like LastPass that help you do that. The federated model, which came out of a desire of not needing to remember this, is they came a proliferation of companies that are just known for knowing you better than anyone else, like a Google or Facebook. They've already authenticated you, they've got your life on there, they've got pictures of you. And so they've become sort of the trusted in-betweens. And so now you can log into your Airbnb account or your Instacart account using your Facebook login or using your Gmail login. And that's creative and it's complex. What one does in that journey though is the Facebook and the Google now starts to know everything else you do. And so that's a design choice and a personal choice, but it's definitely an improvement from a username and password all over the place. What decentralized ID does now, and I'll go a little bit into the technology later, is it really dismantles that and it starts to put you in the middle, where you're the one holding the information that someone needs. And yes, it's been granted to you by people who are trusted. So a lot of our IDs are coming from sovereign organizations, governments. And then you pick how you share it. And then it further challenges even more to not just share the kind of ID you know today, but maybe just the information from that ID that's needed for that particular use case. And there are standards developing around the world that are starting to unify what that structure for decentralized identity looks like. And it's from the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium's verifiable credential model and trust over IP. And it's been a topic that's been growing since, and it's not just this year, it's maybe a decade ago, but there's been improvements in emerging technology that truly really enable this concept. And so we're in a very exciting place now where we can really engage on shifting to this model now. Susan.
Yeah, and Canada is like, maybe you could say a couple of words, like we are named in a lot of like global publications as the country that is at the front of this movement.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is maybe a year ago, we would be like, "Oh, come on, is this really going to happen?" And it seems to be emerging quite nicely. So,
yeah, and you know, it's easier, and I will admit, for nations that aren't as federated as us, where your ID and your services all exist in one layer of government. And so it's a little easier to expedite on that kind of place. So Estonia is leading, India has the Aadhaar card, but I don't believe we're far behind now. And so yeah, it's an exciting time for Canada. And the other word for decentralized ID that you'll often hear is self-sovereign identity, or SSI. And Canada has a lot of leaders in the space, internationally known, and a lot of them in our provinces actively working on this. One founding trustee of the Sovereign Foundation, which is one of the blockchain ledgers networks that's popular in enacting self-sovereign identity. The author is a founding trustee and author of the book, which we've got a little display on here, is Drummond Reed. And I'd like to read how he describes self-sovereign identity. It's a lifetime portable identity for any person, organization, or thing that does not depend on any centralized authority and can never be taken away. Think about it today, our IDs don't quite fit that definition. We do require a central authority to very much authenticate us, but also renew it, and when really it's something that belongs to you. Suze, I know you're reading this book.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add about I think it's a great read. I know I've just skimmed through some chapters.
No, I
What
just
started you on
It's-
self-sovereign identity?
Oh, sorry, say that again.
What jumped out for you as you were
Yeah.
embracing self-sovereign identity?
I mean, what I love about this book is it's a book for everyone. If you're a technologist, there's chapters in here. If you are a policy person, you're passionate about governance and policy, there's work in here. A lot of work has been done in this book to help us all understand how to tell the story, depending on who you're talking to, because it's a very complex thing to understand. And just the use cases at the back start to show like and we've got some material to go through, but just how massive this opportunity is in terms of, you know, being able to access services more privately and just the reuse of the credentials, which we'll talk about more. But anyway, it's an easy read. If you're into this topic and, you know, you see a path forward for you to participate in this world and whatever diverse skill you bring to it, it's a great read, and it's a pretty new book, and some good Canadian content in there.
So let's go to the next slide. So this was my aha moment as a semi-technologist and consultant. When I saw this model, that's when I think I got excited about wanting to really push this movement forward. And it's I just noticed the issuer title's missing from the green one.
Oh no.
Anyway, so this is the W3C verifiable credential model. You'll see a triangle sometimes, or you'll see this version, or you have the issuer, which is the green box, the holder and the verifier, and there's like a dotted line of trust between the issuer and verifier. Issuers are your trusted entities that would provide you your foundational IDs today, like the Ministry of Transport that would give you a driver's license, the Government of Canada that would give you a passport, your university that would give you your diploma or degree.
I was trying to annotate it, sorry.
Right. And then the holder is you, and really in the W3C verifiable credential model, it's you holding this credential in a digital way, which often, and it only makes sense that it's an extension in your phone, because that's pretty much attached to most holders anyway, and in how they interact digitally. And the verifiers, who are normally today would go back to the issuer, if you think about it, to make sure that what I'm sharing is actually true. If I am saying like if you're going to the US for work, you've got to take your degree or diploma, the real one that's probably framed in your mom's house. You got to take that one, the real one with the emblem on it, to the border before they give you the TN visa. They make a phone call back to your university and the government, and it's almost like nobody's trusting you. They're putting you out of it and going back and forth. This model does not require the verifier to do that anymore. Also, in the way it's designed, may not even require to see a lot of that information. So I'll explain how that works a bit, and I'm going to spend a bit of time here. The issuer is the one that gives you your credentials, but what you give to verifiers is called proofs. So you're not necessarily sharing the entire credential, you're just sharing proof of what it is they're asking you for. So to the example of, age, I don't need to give my entire driver's license to buy the bottle of wine. I just need to send you a proof that I'm of a certain age. And how does the verifier trust what they're receiving? And that's where the trust model at the bottom becomes important. And there's tech now that can enable it. But before I get to the tech, the trust, what the verifier is really checking against the trust model is 4 things. One, the issuer, is it a trusted issuer, and should they be the ones issuing this particular proof that I got? So it checks this trust framework that goes, oh yeah, Ministry of Transport, yeah, I know them, and yeah, they're the ones who usually prove age, check. They're checking to see if this proof was it given to you and not someone else. Can I trust that this holder is the person that should be holding this credential and proof? They're checking to see, then they're checking to also see that this proof and credential is actually valid in the time that the check-in is happening. It hasn't been revoked. Let's say you're an irresponsible driver and you should not be buying another bottle until XYZ tickets are paid, and that right has been taken away. The verifier in that time also gets to check whether that credential is valid. And lastly, they get to make sure that the holder is a trusted individual in the ecosystem. So the way that's, what's nice about that trusted framework at the bottom is none of that personal data has to be stored there. The verifier isn't going and checking all of that personal or health information at that. They're just making sure that the model is holding together. And all of this works when there's a governance structure built on that trust framework, on who is allowed to write into the trust framework and who is allowed to read in the trust framework. And the technology that really enables that today is blockchain. Immutable proof. It's been used for a little while now, where when a transaction is recorded, it is foolproof, there's no vulnerability. And that's the model that's being used to record trusted issuers into the ecosystem, and how verifiers can ping and make sure that it is who they say they are. But think about it even greater. The blockchain network is not localized. It can exist for the whole world. So now this credential you have allows you access elsewhere, which today that's not very seamless. Countries need to trust each other. They need to call back. Just because you've got a driver's license here doesn't allow you to easily rent a car elsewhere. That now becomes significantly seamless when that trust framework is established and governed properly. So I'll pause there. And I know I may have said a lot there, but this is the piece that really I had that aha moment on. Whoa, that's self-sovereign identity. And then your mind goes crazy on all of the use cases that you could possibly enact on this.
And I think, as we evolve our storytelling capabilities through this, I think what I'm hearing is we probably want to identify under the verifier what the things are that you're talking about that are being pinged for. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is happening in real time. It's not a process that's happening, right? It's like instantaneous. So now imagine people going back and forth to get services, like let's say social services, they're going, into the social service office, getting, paperwork they have to sign. Maybe they need to go get more information or proof of employment. All of these things are happening. They take time, they take, effort, they take gasoline driving places, and you end up with a stack of stuff on your desk that you throw out a year later rather than filing. Now, all of this is really going to be frictionless and seamless and happen instantaneously as we evolve the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and I will admit it's not easy to just buy into the blockchain technology and this framework right away, and that definitely is the case for the vaccine credentials for those of us who have them already. Ideally, if it was truly built this way, you would just beep something and it would already know that you are who you are. But I think there's baby steps before we get there. This proof concept that I just talked about, I don't have to share my entire credential. Maybe we start with having to share the entire credential. So it is quicker, and that's what we're doing with the vaccine credential, because what's tricky is when the verifying side is not aligned on the rules, then the rules engine sits on that end. So you kind of need to share your facts and they'll determine. So the complication with the vaccine credential is it's not the same rule around the world, or even in our own provinces and territories. Some of us are okay with 1 dose, some of us need 2 doses, sometimes it's 18 days, sometimes it's 14 days. And so you need to share the facts and then let the verifier do the determination. But what will change when it's aligned on certain things like age proofs, et cetera, is the verifier is asking you for, hey, I'm coming to you with needing to know your ID and your age. You open up your phone, you're like, yeah, my driver's license is in here. I'm gonna click consent for age. And all it's sharing is that, yep, I am greater than 19 years of age based on that credential. So the verifier really does not get anything extra. There is absolutely no data storage. It's unless you have consented just to share the proof.
It's a yes, no, right? Yep.
Yeah.
You can buy the booze. Nope, you cannot.
Yeah, and it leaves a lot of bias out of the verifier, and frankly makes the verifiers' lives a lot easier, because a lot of them I don't think want to do a lot of the adjudication, as long as those rules are built in, and it's a different way of carrying around your identity, sharing your identity, and having it on your phone. There's all these levels of assurance built in, because you've got your PIN to go in, or you've got your biometrics to go in. And even further, when you build wallets into these phones, you have liveness checks before you even open up your wallet. So it really like ups the game on security much further.
I'm stuck in the middle. I've got plastic on my phone.
On your phone. So yeah, so that's the verifiable credential ecosystem. And I just wanted to spend a bit of time here, because if you pick up the book and read it, or you talk about or hear about digital identity, you will hit on these topics: the issuer, the holder, the verifier, and governance and trust. So we'll move to the next slide. I'll be quick on this one. This is sort of a nice summary of that anatomy. You're at the center and you've got that foundational ID. You've got a bunch of attributes around you that change over time, including your age, your professional designations, et cetera. And those are used to create credentials, and you choose how you share that because of these controls and enablers put around it. And I love this image, Suzanne, that you've pulled together. It's like the designer explanation for the triangle I'm a fan of, where the holder manages the credentials and chooses where to share them. So,
yeah, and just, you know, I think you've touched on it quite a bit, as this is going to be an evolution, right? There will be a hybrid solutions. And so federated and centralized are represented on this slide as well, because it's not going to overnight happen where this beautiful world exists. So, all right. And then you've got a great story to illustrate this, a journey.
Yeah. And so, yeah, what does this look like? What's the credit card? We tried to draw it up with a credit card onboarding experience. So you go on your desktop today to initiate a credit card application. I mean, really quickly, the way it probably is done today is have to order a credit card report. You probably have to share proof of income, which you've got to log into your work, which is another username, password, possibly download that or have work shared directly with the bank. Some amount of time passes, and then you get something in the mail that says you're probably approved. This experience is that fully digital with digital identity enabled and instantaneous. So just do a quick walkthrough. You're on a desktop, you're logged into the credit card bank application. It needs some information from you. It says, it's the verifier in the story. It says, here, I need proof of income. And you're like, yep, got it. You go to your phone, you use your biometrics to turn it on. You click on your digital wallet. I'm on the third image now. And depending on whether you are doing this application on your phone or on the desktop, you have a couple of methods on how you share the information. If it's on the desktop and you have your ID on your phone, you're possibly scanning a QR code. It builds a link between the two, and you consent to sharing your annual income, which is a credential, by the way, that your employer would have already granted you. They're the issuer. It has your annual income in there. You've consented to share that. They verify that you fit the box. They maybe pre-fill a form, ask you to fill some other things in. They either have to go away to get a credit check done, or that's another credential that you hold on your phone that you continue to share instantly. And now imagine that they've got all of that already proofed based on some basic rules. They generate your credit card, which, by the way, also goes into your wallet right then and there, and you're off to the races. So a different experience with self-sovereign identity, you at the center, because of credentials that belong to you, are with you and you sharing it in real time. So Susan, I'm noticing that like eye scratch everywhere.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, I'm gonna work on getting rid of that.
So you know, I feel like I again, I'm guilty of it. I jump into the tech a little bit because that's what gets me excited. But all of this comes back to those imperatives of the human me. Like, what do we need to do to really make digital identity not fall into those pitfalls of usual digital transformation? And how do we bring this back? And the biggest imperative, no matter which standard you're looking and reading on the topic, will say citizen-centric, person-centered. Do I truly value the use of this in my ecosystem? The second is cooperative, and is also the part I get excited about, is there has to be true public-private partnerships. Imagine that the government's just issuing credential and no one cares to use it, or services are craving to use these credentials, but nobody trusted is ready to provide it. This ecosystem really, in my mind, requires such great partnership and cooperation to really make this viable. Future ready, use the emerging tech we have, be open to it, to adapting and flexing, because it's still evolving and it's a space that needs to be continually responsible as well for the social impact that it brings. And it also, because there's a lot to do around accessibility that this can solve for, because it goes back to the importance of identity, regardless of community, creed, and having responsible, accessible design, which decentralized ID truly can bring to the table, is the fourth imperative that I would say is driving trusted digital identity. Suzanne, I know you have a lot more to add to our four imperatives. Is there anything I didn't touch on?
Well, I think you did a great job, and we're running short on time, so I won't unpack more of it. But I think just one thing to note on here is there are many, many, many companies that are already doing this right now, and no, not any one of those. What's the one that comes to mind? Evernym is a big player, but there's hundreds of Evernyms around the world, and no one on its own. And so it really does need to be this adaptive, flexible, inclusive kind of ecosystem and solution. It will take an ecosystem to make this real.
Yeah. So I'll drive through this one really quickly, and I think we've touched on this. Not a new topic, but the world really started paying attention around 2016. It was a big topic at the World Economic Forum. Deloitte helped put together, along with a few others, this blueprint for digital identity, and still very relevant today, which goes to show a great idea, but not quite ready yet. But then the pandemic hit, and in Canada alone, we've had, the DIAC is how that's called, the Digital Identity Authority of Prudential Council. I never remember the full thing. DIAC was responsible for creating what this framework looks like in Canada. And they started with the overview in 2016, right after the World Economic Forum. But from 2019 onwards, the model's been established, the framework's been established. concept of what verified organizations and people in Canada look like has been established, and now even assurance services. So those of us who do build technologies and solutions in this ecosystem very much have to be blessed and approved by DIAC in the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. And then another way that Canada is really leading is through our Digital Identity Laboratory. It's a not-for-profit place where companies, governments are invited to either utilize sandbox services or have assessment services to make sure that their solutions or their thought processes check all the boxes of the PCTF. It's really the mission statements to remove or really increase digital identity adoption in Canada. So it's another great place where I'm seeing public, private sectors, independents really coming and challenging each other at the Digital Identity Laboratory. So moving on, and governments are not behind. In fact, in Canada, we've got BC, Ontario, Alberta, I would say, are leading provinces on the topic. And Ontario, and I believe this is a public paper, really has been reaching out and doing very thoughtful market engagements with academics and technologists, consultants, and industry leaders. And they've put together use cases that digital identity could really enable. And they truly, truly believe that to really make this work is you've got to think about adoption and the value that it brings to the people quickly. And they've highlighted here on the right-hand side, which they believe are the most value-add use cases right now for the digital identity economy. And a lot has to do around access to health services, ease of financial institution services, and then all the basic foundational identity stuff like driver's licenses and business registrations, et cetera.
Yeah, and they've been very open about, inviting conversation around this and sharing all of this. And what I love about this chart here is prioritize speed over perfection. You see that at the top. When do you hear a government say that? They are really doing this right. They've got some brilliant brains working on this problem. And I love, to Giselle's point, we're talking about the Pan-Canadian framework. There is a lot of momentum behind making this interoperable sort of dream come true. So yeah. We share this just as one example because it was out there and we've got it. But if we show you just quickly the next slide, I don't know if you had prepared to talk about this one, Giselle, or
go for it, Suze.
Yeah, this is, it's off of Medium, a blog post, and what's beautiful about this is it's 35 use cases that just, if you just don't even look at the details and you look at the color, how many places are you going to be able to use these credentials that you've got once, right? So out of 35 credentials, I don't even begin to be able to count all of these lines, but you're able to access services and engage with all of these different places where we all do business every day, in the city, traveling, health, business, education. So I really like the visualization of that one. Okay, so the promise here is to get from how this all started, where the ignition happened, the fire that's burning, and now wrapping up a little bit with the stoke, right? So reaching this whole future of identity is going to require a workforce of diverse capabilities, right? Innovation is going to need the attention of a lot of different types of people. Market drivers, just quickly, this is out of the book we mentioned earlier, but a resistance to surveillance economy, I think, is the most interesting thing, right? Everybody is awakening to this. Facebook knows where I am. I've got a footprint. Siri's listening to me. I talked about, kayaks, and now all of a sudden I have ads for kayaks. This is, a big moment in time where everyone's just had enough. I was talking to a colleague earlier today saying, I actually feel like we're heading to a moment where there's going to be this sort of analog movement at some point in my lifetime where everyone's just done with it. It's not happening tomorrow, and maybe digital identity and self-sovereign identity is going to actually prevent that from happening, because there's a lot of good about digital that benefits the world. So I'm trying to move a little bit at pace here because I know we're running out of time, but this chart's really just to represent that we've been doing work on the left side of this chart a lot. Identity and access management is literally log on, right? A lot of security around it, authentication, getting behind a firewall. All the way over on the right are the benefits that we've been talking about in this presentation. Truly, when we get to global interoperability, that will be the the bulk of the benefits that we can achieve. So we've drawn out a value chain here. This is really, I talked about the hundreds of vendors. There's all kinds of people operating in this space, selling services in this space right now, evolving their products. So, as people are kind of embarking on their careers or thinking about where they want to go, I know that the whole focus of this symposium is project management. This is a complex space with a complex ecosystem. There is plenty of room for management, for all kinds of brains to come in and help solve this and make these connections. All the way from strategic planning on the left, lots of data work and collection and enrollment. And then this portion of the chart here is what Giselle unpacked for us with what we call the triangle, with the issuer, the holder, and the verifier. And then all the way out to the service providers, Airbnb, Instacart, social services. And then all the underpinning enablers are there. So lots and lots of space in this value chain for work that needs to get done. And then this slide, like rather than, put a whole list of the skills that we see, building our teams with and the folks that we need, we thought let's sort of tell the story about, the whole flow of how to execute on this type of complex solution. And you're going to need to be educating clients and the public. And, I felt like when we got out of the gates with the, it's not a vaccine passport in Alberta. But at first I heard of friends who were, printing out their vaccine thing and laminating it. And no one told them that there was more coming. The QR code is coming. There will be another iteration. So education is going to be a huge part of that. Strategy and road mapping and governance we talked about. Organizational readiness and change management. That's never going away. That's just really important capabilities. Technology, vendor selection, this is that orchestrating of the ecosystem and all of the sort of integrations and components that need to come together. When I think of program management, we're thinking of program management, we're thinking of project management, and very importantly, we're thinking of product management. And I know that that's a topic at SAIT and that there are some connections there, but the product world is going to be very important here. Design capabilities, service blueprinting, ecosystem integration, security is just massive, right? This whole like privacy preservation and that hierarchy where we are not so safe in a digital world. Cyber is just going to grow. Yeah, so that's just a little flyby on sort of the capabilities. I'm trying to leave a few minutes, and I didn't do a great job of that for questions, but there's also this World Economic Forum. You can go on the internet and find that, but what they're looking for out into 2025. So kind of a quick flyby at the very end there. Wanted to leave time for discussion, so I'm happy to stick around if anybody wants to. I'm not sure if that's cool, but and then as promised, here's the QR codes for our LinkedIn profiles if you want to connect to us. How'd I do, Luann?
You did awesome. Thank you. Thank you both, Suzanne and Giselle. What an interesting topic. I don't see any questions in the chat, but so many things popped out to me while I was listening to the two of you. This just really appeals to my sense of efficiency. And, it's been interesting how prior to the pandemic, so many of these things, we'd be talking about at SAIT and, things, people have great ideas, but there was no urgency to it. And so, a silver lining of the pandemic was that a lot of this stuff is moving pretty quickly and for good reasons, I think. And you mentioned blockchain helping with this process. SAIT was actually the first in Canada to issue digital credentials through blockchain. And I think prior to it happening, You know, again, there were probably lots of people thinking, well, why wouldn't we do that? But it was actually a student who came up with the idea and then just started moving fairly quickly. And so it's pretty exciting that, you know, we are moving towards that. I guess one question I have for you though is, you mentioned that trust piece, and that, you know, in order for us to move this forward, we've got to have countries and businesses around the world that actually trust in this and believe in it, for it to really kind of spread. Do you think that that's going to continue to happen at a fairly quick pace, or do you see some resistance to that still?
Giselle,
Yeah. I'd say before the pandemic, maybe resistance, but it's happening rather naturally now. And I'm living and breathing the vaccine credential and the topic internationally as well. And so, yeah, now there is listen, we're trying to do the right thing. We don't want to be in this hellhole, for lack of a better word, for longer. If this is the governance model, like, we all trust that the internet is built safely globally. And that's the same symposium that's come together to create the framework for this. So we trust that. We trust that what you're writing on the blockchain is heavily governed by few trusted entities internationally. Then yeah, it'll be more about there will be early adopters and there'll be laggers, like anything else.
Yeah.
But I think showing the value soon will get it's happening faster now.
Yeah, interesting. And I know, even just speaking about the vaccine passport, you know, in Alberta, we rolled it out with the QR code, but we didn't provide businesses with the technology to be able to read the QR code. So, you know, it really shows the pace of this, and how, like you said, early adopters will just run with it. But the bigger piece, I think, is we need to provide the facility to be able to use it too. So lots of great opportunities here I see for this. So again, thank you both so much. Fascinating topic, and really appreciate you being here to on this day to present your topic.
thanks for inviting us. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thanks for providing your QR codes. So that's awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. And there's still lots going on with the symposium, so please feel free to jump into another session. Okay. Take care.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.